Hi, this is Tanya Becker, and I'm your host for today's episode of PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating. If you haven't already, please subscribe to PartsVu's YouTube channel. Also, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of our podcast episodes, subscribe to PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. You're in for a treat. I had the opportunity to sit down with Luke Dunkin. Luke is a former pro bass angler who fished the FLW Tour. Today, he's one of the top bass podcasters, is a commentator for the National Professional Fishing League, and has been a sales professional for TH Marine for more than 17 years. If you don't currently subscribe to Luke Dunkin's Traveling Circus on YouTube or Luke Dunkin's Low Budget Live on all the major podcast platforms, definitely do so. Luke's most important job, though, is being a dad. He has 5 kids, and these days he spends a lot of time fishing with them. Thanks so much for joining me, Luke.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation for sure.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm so happy to have you because, you know, professional bass anglers obviously spend a lot of time researching industry advancements that can help them perfect their craft and improve performance, ultimately win more money. I mean, you've spent so much time in this world, both as a professional angler and now your podcast and TH Marine and so forth. So I wanted to, talk to you to step behind the scenes of the professional bass angling world to discuss some of the advancements and technologies, materials, and so forth, circulating amongst the pros to kind of give wreck anglers a bit of a window into what's out there and what's coming down the road for them. You game for that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. That's good. Electronics, especially advancements in electronics are a huge conversation piece. I feel like daily on social media, from your pro anglers all the way down to the wreck anglers, just everybody trying to, it's almost like when everybody moved out west looking for gold, right? Like everybody's trying to find that next little nugget to advance them over their competition, or just catch more fish, enjoy your Saturday by catching fish, not finding fish,
No, that's absolutely. I mean, it doesn't really seem that long ago since, the old, green box flash or, depth finders were the thing, but we've come obviously a very long way from that. I mean, what technology advancements are most exciting to the pros right now?
I think that the most overwhelming thing in the last few years have been forward facing sonar like Garmin LiveScope, and then you've got, Humminbird, Lowrance, they've all join that bandwagon, of course, but it is to me, it's the most interesting thing that we've seen in a very long time. It has taught us more about the way fish behave in certain situations throughout the year. And more importantly, you can see your bait, you can see the fish, you can see how they react to your lure. It's crazy what it's done. And it's really opened up. Like I can't, and it wasn't like you said, it wasn't that long ago we didn't even have it. It wasn't even a thought. And now I can't imagine not having it in the sport because so many events get won with it now. It's just something, and it, like anything else in professional fishing, the guys that are really good with it have shown us other possibilities that we didn't even think were out there with the technology. So that for me, and then just where trolling motors are headed as well. Like I think there's just technology there is very, very cool. Was just constantly changing, constantly getting better on your batteries. The anchor locking, where you can just hit one button and sit on one spot. You don't have to fight the wind. It's really crazy what all that has done. And guys are using both of those in conjunction, the electronics and the trolling motor together.
That's right. So other than the kind of the locking in place functionality of these trolling motors, I mean, what other kind of technology is there that's really interesting?
Well, I'm running a Garmin this year, but they, Lowrance came out with one. Minn Kota was kind of the first with that spot locking technology, right in the beginning, and everybody's just kind of, the imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? So that's what happens. We see it in our industry, whether it's lures, whether it's boats, whether it's electronics. So Minn Kota, they were the first to have that, and I think some of the newer companies that have dropped trolling motors, the goal is to be quiet, especially around shallow water. So I think that's what some of the new versions have done to be more efficient when it comes to batteries with brushless motors. That's the big push now. So that I think those two things are where we're going further. And And I like the fact that there's a lot of competition in that market now, because Minn Kota was really on top for a long time. They make a great motor. But I think there are certain guys, we're very brand oriented, in the country, whether you drive a Ford or a Chevy, you know what I mean? We have a brand
Yeah.
pride. And I think, you have guys running Garmin's that want to have Garmin 100%. You have people that are Lowrance, so they wanted a Lowrance trolling motor that reacts to their Lowrance electronics. I think it's a really cool time, but I think as those advancements come, there are more trolling motors coming. I believe Power Pole's got one coming as well. So things are just changing. They're getting smaller. They're getting, the brackets are getting stronger. But I would, for me, I think the battery efficiency is the thing, and they're faster too. More powerful. Just a lot of advancements in just the last couple of years that we've seen.
It seems like more. I mean, I think that anglers are very brand loyal, as we tend to be brand loyal in many aspects of our lives. But there's clearly some technology brands are stronger in one area than others, and I mean they each kind of have their advantages. They're kind of the places that they shine, and it seems like more anglers are kind of combining to get the best of every brand that's out there. I don't know whether you're seeing that or not.
Oh, absolutely. We went from this time in professional bass fishing where, especially on the pro side, it's always been that way. I feel like at the recreational angler level. But once you kind of move up that ladder, if that's your, goal in life as a competitive angler, you get into the sponsorship world and all that. And that's where it gets tricky. And I think guys, a lot of pros were locked into contracts where they're exclusive. And now we've seen this new thought process. Well, Lowrance has this that I like. Humminbird has this. Garmin has this. And they do this combination thing. They get out of their contracts, and it's a widespread thing that we've seen really in just the last couple of years. Some guys bucking that trend, but certainly seeing it. And look, it's the same with lure companies. No company is going to make, a perfect lineup, right? Like you're never that you can use 100% of the time when you go out. And it's the same with electronics. The same with both. They all have really cool features and benefits. And sometimes they, one company does have a leg up on a certain, whether that's a side scan or, because I would say on forward facing for sure, like Garmin, they perfected that, right? And they keep pushing it with new transducers and things to make it that much better than the competition. And I think that now, not to say that the others that are out there aren't good, because I think they are. But I think they were at the forefront, much like Humminbird was at the forefront of the side imaging revolution several years ago. And they have, and I do think that they do a very good job with some of their products for sure. But you'd certainly see the mix match hodgepodge, of brands these days on as far as electronics are concerned.
Absolutely. And we all know that there's been some really, great strides in battery technology.
Yes.
And I wonder, I haven't done any research or reading on this, but I wonder, I mean, there's obviously a big focus, and there has been for the last several years on battery technology for electric cars and so forth, hybrid cars. I wonder whether that's, part of what's driving the battery innovation in the fishing world.
I think so.
Or at least, we're picking up that technology at least.
I always feel like in the marine industry, we are behind the automotive industry, right? Like with trends, whether that be, we saw it with LED lights, you start seeing everything go LED in vehicles several years ago, and then we kind of catch up, right? Like that, that is certainly the case. And I think, and I've worked on some projects with some boat builders through TH where they're trying that battery operated, first ever gasless, boat. And it's just going to be tricky, I think, to get to where we need to be as far as performance, because as bass fishermen, we all like to go fast, right? Like that's the, that's the thing. And to get to where something is comparable to a 250 horsepower, I think it's going to take some time to get there. Certainly a possibility.
One of the biggest, I think it'll happen eventually, but I think one of the biggest challenges is not tearing the boat apart, right? Because I mean, these electric motors, on the Ford F-150, et cetera. I mean,
they are incredibly powerful, like
Yes.
instantly.
For sure. Yes. Tesla, Ford. Yes. They've got the horsepower figured out on those for sure.
They got the horsepower figured out. I think in the marine world, we're just going to have to figure out how to channel that a little bit and not like tear everything to bits, like,
Well, that and absolutely transoms. You got to worry about transoms at that point, and I think just the overall design of the boat has to stay the same, right? And weight distribution is so huge in any boat, for performance. So I think that's but I think we're probably closer to that than we realize.
I think so.
That we're seeing that, especially on the vehicle side, we're seeing it more and more, and it's more accessible to folks. And I think that, and the price comes down a little bit more all the time. I think we will see that eventually. I hope so. I think that'd be great.
I agree. Yeah, we figured out how to keep cars and trucks from flying off the road, even though they can accelerate extremely fast.
Absolutely.
So, so we've got to be able to do the same for boats, right? I would think. Is the other thing that's made some really interesting strides is mapping. I mean, what are you seeing there?
Well, I think that that's where, for me, I hear rumors that things are that's kind of that next frontier that everybody's really that's gonna be the next big push is mapping. Like, yeah, we got the forward facing technology, we got side imaging, we got down scan. But that's where it's heading, and something really cool in the last few years. I know I keep going back to Garmin, but I use Garmin, the most. They came out with this, they bought Navionics, and they did this deal called relief shading, which is almost like a 3D overlay that shows you contours that make them really jump out at you. That was one of the coolest innovations I've seen in a long time. But along with depth shading, which a lot of pro fishermen in particular have gotten really, really good at. And what that means, basically, if you've never used it, is I can set, 0 to 5 feet in the color of red, all right? And then I'm going 10 to 15 feet in yellow, and then 15 plus is green. So when I'm looking for, if I get a depth range in my mind, this is where the fish are set up, it makes little key spots jump out at you when you look at that map when you're cruising down the lake. And so that's a huge stride in the last few years that just really, really helps, especially when you're going to a fishery you've never been to, which is where all that. But to me, some of the things I'm hearing mapping wise, I don't know where it's headed, but I hear that's the next, like, going to be kind of quote arms race coming up, is who can do something just mind blowing with mapping. And I hear that it's coming. It will be interesting, because I don't know how I can get a lot better than this, other than like some kind of real time Google Earth type overlay, because a lot of us now are using iPads in the boat with Google Earth. I'm a big believer in Google Earth study. I like to do time lapse study. You can go back and see, years past, low water years, high water years, and you can see how a lake. I'm big about that when I'm especially going to a new body of water, and I do it just at home. Like for my home lakes, I just get bored sometimes and go back, and it's crazy what you will see and find in that. But I think a way to combine those at some point where you can kind of flip back and forth, almost like you have on Google Maps on your phone, where you can do a hybrid view. I think something like that in real time, we'll see more of that coming soon.
Do you think we could get to the point where you can be, in a tournament, scenario, zipping to your, down the lake, like you were saying, and see the red, that the ideal depth that you maybe established for that day, given the conditions or whatever, and just, be cruising along and see that, and, be able to swing back.
Oh yeah.
To check out that spot.
Oh yeah. That's happened to me countless times. I mean, if you, in specifics, you get, these bass are relating to points, and because they will, on a lot of lakes, they're set up in a pattern, right? So, they're in 5 to 10 feet of water on point. So I will go in once I if I realize or recognize something's going on, I'll go change my depth settings because you can do it on the fly. And then when I'm running down the lake, like you're saying, I'm like, these next, I can zoom out on my map. These next 3 points are identical to what I just found. And it just makes you just that much more efficient on the water.
Well, that's awesome. Is there any evidence that the fish are getting used to these technologies?
Yes.
Maybe used to like sonar sounds, used to like different things. Okay.
Yes.
So how does that?
Well, and for me, I'm on the Tennessee River. I grew up, and we typically we have these large schools of bass, okay, that get offshore in the summer, and we were doing a lot of things, not to you know, wave the flag for the Tennessee River contingency, but we were fishing offshore way more than a lot of people for schools of bass. So a lot of guys down here in this part of the world really got fine tuned to electronics before a lot of other parts of the country. And what we have seen, especially with mapping, because a lot of the spots that we would fish, I found, you know, by the hard way, riding around with a paper map and comparing and contrasting things on the bank. And I mean, that's how I grew up fishing with my dad and grandfather down the Tennessee River. And when those map chips came out, and all of a sudden people could see everything and where the creek mouths were and the ditches and the high spots and things, it changed everything. And you could immediately see a difference in the way fish reacted to your lures, the way they would bite. Now, don't get me wrong, it can still be fantastic, but it is very much, I shouldn't use the word easy, but it was easy 10 years ago on some of these places to, I mean, you could catch 100 bass. And now they get very, very stingy. They still do the same thing. They go through their, you know, patterns the same every year, but it is definitely changing.
Well, it's
but I think that's a combination of not only electronics, but the anglers are better now too.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah.
Because of things like this, right? Videos and podcasts, and they just learn the flow of information. We're all content hungry, and I think that doesn't help things either. You know?
Right. Well, we'll all adapt, including the fish.
For sure.
So it makes they call it a sport for a reason.
No doubt about it. You got to stay up on it and just keep changing. You can't. I will say, I don't think you can get set in your ways anymore. In the same old. You know, you'll have your days where your favorite thing will work, but most of the time you've got to be really versatile.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it didn't change, it wouldn't be much fun.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So I think there's also, I mean, from my understanding, been some interesting advancements in rod materials, you know, and also fishing line materials, hooks, that kind of thing. I mean, what's in fashion amongst the pros right now on that front?
Well, I think, you know, the braided lines that we have now are they're smaller diameter than they used to be. Their castability is so much better. They have a lot of them have a smooth coating on them, so they're not as hard on the guides of your rods. And then the fluorocarbon, you know, just movement that started several years ago, started in Japan, like a lot of, you know, fishing techniques that we utilize here do. They're, you know, way more advanced than us in a lot of things. But line is just stronger. It's easier to cast. It doesn't, you know, I compare back in the day, it was like a slinky. You put new spool of line on, and within a couple of days, it just come off your reel looking like a slinky going down your stairs, right? So now the life cycle of line is a lot longer, thanks to a lot of technology. And then hooks, they're so much, you know, they're so much sharper than they used to be, with all sorts of technologies. You know, they're smaller gauge than they used to be a lot of times, and it's amazing where we are. And then on terminal tackle as well, you've got tungsten weights. We're going to tungsten instead of lead, which is more sensitive, smaller in diameter. So a half ounce weight that used to be this big is now this big, and it's that all is part of, you know, tricking these finicky bass.
Yeah,
absolutely. As we go along and they get rode over, they have 3 eyeballs now sometimes from all the transducers around.
Yeah. I think the composite materials, you know, that they're using to manufacture the rods are different as well, and more responsive and so forth.
A lot more responsive and a lot lighter, you know, to hold a rod and reel from just 10 years ago versus a majority of the rods that are out there now. It's crazy to feel that weight difference and the balance in the rods. You almost feel like you're going to break them. They're so light sometimes, because I grew up using these broom handle rods and reels, you know, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, every time somebody comes up with a new crazy, you know, line of rods, you're like, I mean, I don't know that I want to use this. I feel like it's going to break when I set it, but the strength is there as well. That's what's so crazy. Reels are lighter, more compact, cast further, so much smoother with the bearing systems they have now. I can't imagine, like, my children, my 14-year-old in particular loves to bass fish. And I'm like, you spoiled. You're so spoiled. Like, I just think about that. Like, you get to grow up in this era of, oh man, I want to learn how to do this technique. Hey, Dad, I watched that on YouTube. Like, he'll get in the boat and go, hey, Dad, can I use a blah, blah, blah? I'm like, how do you know about that? Well, I watched so and so's YouTube channel. Oh, okay. And then he wants to, but he knows how to fish it when he picks up the rod. He's like, yeah, they said to do this, this, and this. And it's such a crazy time to think. And I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the high school kids that are coming up in it now, the college kids, because in my day, like my dad used to tell me, in my day, it was like, you learned it in a magazine, you learned it on a TV show, or you learned it on your own out there, workshopping it. You're like, I want to learn to use this technique I read about in Bassmaster magazine. And then you went out on the water and tried to figure it out. And more times than not, failed miserably.
The crazy thing is your son is going to be saying the same thing to his
$1,000,000%, right? Well, something you said that really, in the beginning, when you said we're not too far removed from that Lowrance little green box. And it just made me think, I'm 30, I'll be 39 this year. I started bass fishing with my dad when I was 10. To just think about like my first boat, like it really, like a lot, that one line made me think of so much. And I'm like, where just trolling motors are, and we have power poles, and we have all these things. And I'm like, how did we get here so fast? And it just constantly evolves. It's a really cool time and not just, in the bass fishing world, just boating in general, just everything is so user friendly now. And makes your time on the water more enjoyable. There's nothing more frustrating than going out and having equipment issues and things like that.
Absolutely. And speaking of power poles, I mean, shallow water anchor systems are another, you said it, I mean, another area where it's becoming increasingly sophisticated and really helpful.
Absolutely.
I mean, what are you seeing there?
Well, I think it's a lot like the trolling motor thing. It's a lot like we just talked about with rods and reels. They've gotten faster, more efficient, lighter over time. That was always a knock when those things first came out. People were like, I'm not hanging those off the back of my bass. It'll affect performance. And I think that really they made such a stride in taking the weight out, streamlining the design more and more over time. And now, I mean, you've got Bluetooth connectivity. You can work on them on your phone. You can, set your speed on through an app. I mean, it's crazy and more and more coming all the time, right? Like, I think it's just, as far as just advancements, and I can remember when they first came out, seeing them on a saltwater boat, and laughing like, that'll never take off in the bass. I mean, who's going to put those things on a bass boat, right? And then everybody started getting one. You started seeing guys running one, and it was like a duck swimming with one leg, right? You just spin around in the wind. So then everybody goes to 2 to lock you down. And I'm like, can we get 3? Like, I can't get enough. And it is, I tell people all the time, there's never a point of a day, because people are like, well, I fish deep water, I do this, do I need shallow water anchors? And I can honestly say there's not a point, whether it's launching the boat, tying up to a shallow dock, in a cove, re-rigging, anything, that there's not a day I go bass fishing that I do not utilize shallow water anchors every day at some point, multiple point, and not just shallow water fishing. I mean, like I said, launching the boat, man, no tying up to the dock so many times. And now that goes for where I fish the most, right? Like, I've got a lot of shallow water areas around boat launches and things, but they're just where they have taken us in efficiency on the water. Again, it keeps coming back to that, but I think it's just amazing where we're at right now. And the same goes for hydraulic jack plates. That's another performance piece. Like the Atlas, they're lighter than they used to be, stronger, faster motors. I mean, everything. They're advanced where you can mount those power pole brackets to the side. Like all this, it's a system, really. And it all comes from, like you said at the open, a lot of it comes from professional fishing. It does, from the guys out there putting it through its paces and saying, hey, what if we did this? What if, and going to these companies and just, it really goes hand in hand with a lot of advancements we've seen.
The jack plates are interesting because, I mean, the professional bass anglers tend to stick to 250 or so horsepower engines or so.
Absolutely.
But some of the these outboards have just gotten huge and massive. I mean, and outside of bass boat
Of
applications.
course.
I mean, obviously, you need a different jack plate technology to deal with that. So it's interesting.
Well, it's kept a company like TH Marine on their toes, where you have to constantly keep up with the trends, where motors are headed, because we encounter that in the saltwater world a lot. And I mean, once we got to 350s and 400s and 425s, you kind of start checking up, like, all right, is this something we want hanging on a piece of aluminum on the back of a transom?
Maybe not.
But they have, they've answered the call around every corner on that, and so those advancements are there as well. I think something that, like I mentioned with PowerPole earlier, the connectivity. I think eventually that's where jack plate technology will get, where it's either linked through NEMA or Bluetooth or what have you, to have presets and different things. That it's because jack plates are very strange in that people think they need them, but then they don't necessarily know why they need them, and what they were invented for. Really, a lot of people think, well, it's to get into shallow water, and that does help. But it's because they do raise the motor an additional 6 inches vertically, sure. But it's so much more than that. I mean, for performance and getting that prop to clean water, so you can achieve that maximum performance with a bass boat, bay boat, whatever the case may be. It takes the propeller away from that turbulent water that hits the chines of the boat, the bottom of the boat, because if it's mounted directly to the transom, that prop just has a harder time finding clean water. And so that's why you have the various setbacks, and it's crazy the difference you can see if you go from zero jack plate to, say, a 10-inch setback, the performance benefits that you can gain just in overall speed, fuel efficiency. It's definitely makes a difference.
Absolutely. I know TH Marine is really leading the charge, and in helping these develop many of these advancements with the Atlas brand, and it's fascinating. We should do an entire episode.
We could on that. I have a I think I have more knowledge on that than I want in life. Sometimes I think if you rattled my head, Atlas jack plate logos would come out of my ears sometimes, because we've been dealing with that for, man, I guess we're getting close to the 10-year mark since we introduced that plate, and it has changed so much since the beginning. And it's crazy to think about. It may have been prior to that, honestly. I'm getting old, so I can't really remember exactly how long. But it's crazy that the popularity is still growing. And then, like you said, with these new motor advancements, we have to go to the drawing board a lot and throw a different mousetrap at it as far as strength and stability and things. But it's fun. That's my favorite thing that I get to do in life. One of is to get to work with boat companies in these advancements that they're making, and work in conjunction with them on these advancements. It's so much fun.
Absolutely. And to your point, I think a lot of recreational anglers don't really, I mean, they know they want and need a jack plate,
sure.
They don't really know why. So it's it's almost as complex as the physics of propellers themselves. So it's interesting.
And I would never claim to be an expert when it comes to propellers. I just tend to just put one on and pray that it works the correct way, because I'm not a gearhead. You get a lot of people that are like, well, you need this pitch and this and this, and if the wind's blowing 3 miles an hour across the lake, you need this, and that's going to make that bass boat run a half mile an hour faster. You can get into these. Don't get on a forum and ask a question about a propeller.
You'll get a very long answer and a lot of opinions.
A lot of opinions. Yeah. Why are you doing that? Oh my gosh. Just like anything else, you could ask a question about a lamp in your house on a forum, and it'd be the same thing. Everybody's got an idea what's the perfect solution.
Absolutely. So, in your work with boat builders, in your role, with TH Marine, I mean, is there anything else about the design of bass boats themselves that are interesting, in terms of design modifications, other than the jack plate technology? Any other advancements you can think of?
I think live wheel advancement, obviously the main goal in tournaments is catch and release, and extending the future of the sport by taking care of the fish, the resource. And I think that there are changes in that on a daily basis. I think that there's a big push to change some of the ways that we hold fish in live wells and make the live wells more efficient. And I think there are things that are going to come over from the saltwater world. I've worked with a couple builders. I won't say exactly what the plans are just because they won't be too excited that I did. But there are things that we have seen on keeping live bait alive in the saltwater world that have not been adopted in the bass fishing world yet. But they are looking at that, and I think that once a couple of these companies figure that out, I think it will be the trend moving forward, and I think that it's a positive trend. So I think that's a huge advancement. But then tackle storage, rod storage, because ultimately every bass boat company out there makes a fantastic bass boat. I'm very blessed to get to work with most of them on the TH side of things, and they all make a great platform. But I think the details are what matter the most. And as a fisherman, for me, tackle storage is huge. Tackle organization is huge. Having a comfortable platform to fish out of is also huge. And so we're seeing these. Carpet is slowly leaving bass boats, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. My Express that I run all sea deck, bow to stern.
Really?
And
Okay.
and last year was the first year that I got to experience that. And I don't know. And I've always asked, why do we have carpet in bass boats? Why do we have
It's
carpet?
kind of weird.
It is weird.
Carpet on any boat, really.
Absolutely. And the bay boat world, they've never had carpet, and you just spray the thing out at the end of the day, you brush her down, and you're good to go. We've never had that in bass boats, and carpet was really a crutch for fiberglass manufacturers for a long time to hide ugly, right? You may have an imperfection in a mold on a deck, not on the sides where everybody sees the bright, shiny, bling, glitter of a bass boat, but sometimes those decks are less than perfect, right? So carpet was really to hide eyesores. And those high traffic areas, you may get stress cracks. I mean, they all, it's just fiberglass over time. And so I think a lot of that was done, but now we're seeing there's a few fiberglass boat manufacturers as well as aluminum that are starting to buck that trend and go to the sea deck or a sea deck type, EVA foam floor. Man, I love that. Like, I think that's a huge advancement that we need to see, and we're seeing it right now. And I think within a few years, you'll see almost every bass boat company offer at least one model that is 100% EVA foam floor, no carpet. Carpet just looks so bad. It has so many downsides.
And it feels to me like putting carpet. I mean, I've never thought it really made any sense. I mean, putting carpet in a boat is sort of like putting carpet in your kitchen. It's just kind of like disgusting.
It's a catch-all.
And,
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Really.
Yeah. And then, within 6 months, it looks terrible. You've stood on it in certain places. It's worn out more than it is in other. It's just, as a guy that is fortunate enough to trade boats a lot, it's just always just kind of like at the end of the year, the eyesore. It's like, it didn't matter how great you took care of it or it was in the garage. It just was always going to be that one thing you're like, at the end of the year. So I think that's a huge advancement as well that we're going to start seeing. Will you ever see the floor like in a bay boat and a bass boat? Probably not. But that EVA foam kind of gives you the best of both worlds. It's quiet because that's a big thing. Everybody wants to be stealthy when they're walking around the boat. But I think that is certainly a huge advancement that we're starting to see some guys grab the bull by the horns on and fix their tools where it sets up better for it. But it's just a little different. And I think it's a time thing too, right? When you can just throw carpet down on everything, when it comes to manufacturing time. So I think that's something that has to be taken in consideration as well.
Absolutely. In the EVA foam, you can just clean with like a normal kind of deck cleaner, right? I mean,
deck cleaner and a brush. Okay. I use just my water hose, pull it, right it before I go in the garage after a trip. I've got a long handled brush. I just knock it out, and it's amazing how quick it will just clean up. I mean, if you get any kind of slime coat from a fish on there, or grass residue from aquatic vegetation, mud, sand, it just goes right out of there. It's so great. And it's padded too, so standing on it all day, it's a lot more comfortable, even though they do put a pad under carpet. But for me, it's a comfort thing.
That makes all the sense in the world. Well, this was such a fun conversation. I mean, thanks so much for being here, Luke. We'll have to do more together.
Absolutely, I would love
to.
Fun.
You're a fountain of knowledge, and I encourage all of our listeners to check out Luke Dunkin's Traveling Circuits on YouTube, and you also host on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts as well.
It's everywhere. Amazon. You can ask Alexa to hear my weed eater sounding voice at any time that you when your heart desires the Low Budget Live podcast. But I appreciate you having me on. It was a great time.
No, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating podcast. Are you in a dock war with your boating neighbor for the cleanest boat? Check out our marine soaps, polishes, waxes, and more at PartsVu.com. And for free shipping, use the coupon code PVTalksShine, a special perk for our podcast listeners. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for boating knowledge, to keep in touch with the PartsVu community, and for special sales and promotions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and check out the show notes for the coupon code just mentioned, more information about PartsVu and the products we offer, as well as our boating blog, the PartsVu Xchange. And a big thanks to Mind for performing the original music featured within this podcast.